Good evening and welcome to Generation Movie on a Monday night. Thank God we're both at awkward positions to make sure we get our Return of the Jedi swag in the picture. Rich with his poster, me with my guys. They're all right over my shoulder here. All the Endor garbed Black Series Star Wars figures.
Nice.
Welcome to a special edition. Star Wars gets a lot of special editions. This is a special edition of Generation Movie because we're breaking into our
Oscar. Am I going to be replaced with a CGI person that looks better looking than me?
Yeah,
because I really would appreciate that.
We're gonna. Well, Ken was asking if we're gonna be in a bikini later. I was like, you have to tune in, and my answer is probably no. But I'm not gonna not tease it because that would be something to say. What I would also say is it's a special edition of Generation Movie Net, but I'm joined as always by my special edition, right? One of my special editions in my life, Rich Drees. How's your week going, Rich? I know you and I both celebrated quietly earlier, but it's a good day for facts and not propaganda and stuff. But I don't want to get super
FACTS, not any other word that begins with F.
Well, it was Anchors Away Day. Like I was thinking about it. It's Anchors Away Day. I stole that joke from Greg. But it's a good joke, and I'm gonna use it. How are you? What are you doing? How are things going this week?
I'm doing great. A lot of good movies, came out like this past week. I know we're not going to get into it, but Beau is Afraid I think I might need another watch on it, but the more I think about it, the more I'm thinking it's a masterpiece.
Interesting, because they're also like there's a weird contingent out there where I've not seen it yet. I saw Evil Dead Rises, and I'm gonna be on. I was on a demon-filled, black blood-fueled cloud the rest of the weekend. But I have not seen Beau is Afraid. But the interesting side of it is, even if it bombs terribly, which it kind of looks like it's going to do, A24 is going to support it, and we're going to. I think
they bought themselves some clout with this movie more than anything else.
And that's what A24 is doing, right? A24 is making movies that are outside the box and creating a brand. But it's been a good movie. Like, I was intrigued that there was. Go ahead.
How to Blow Up a Pipeline also came out. It was a Sundance film, if I'm recalling correctly, and I liked it. I thought it was very interesting. It's literally you're just sitting with these people as they plot out and then, set about blowing up a pipeline in Texas as an act of environmental terrorism. And they even discuss, are we terrorists or are we doing something to promote actions that will lead to stopping climate change? And they talk about the idea that
is it a realistic thing to say both? Like, because I think when you talk, you get in a weird spot. I also think one of the things that has to be, there's an intriguing article in Variety that I was looking at where basically every year a bunch of box office people get together. There's a CinemaCon coming up, and it's a huge event. And every year there's like a stock forecast of how well the movie business is going. And this year already is doing very well with over results on John Wick, over results on Scream, over results on Evil Dead, even its first week, considering a movie that cost like $16 to $18 million. Grossing 23 in domestic in its first week is pretty damn good. And basically that investor site or that investor article basically stated that they've upped the ante and feel that this year's already going to be about $3 billion over what they originally thought for last year. And that's, of course, taking into account the phenomenon that is occurring with the Super Mario Brothers movie, which had a third weekend that was at $56 million, which is a lot of money considering that most movies don't make $56 million in its entire, cycle. So it's going to be the first movie over $1 billion. It also is leading to everybody getting super excited about summer movie going season, which starts in 2 weeks with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And we are tonight on the Indie Escape Network, right? And the Indie Escape Network, by the way, which we're very happy at. We're having a great time. All of our content on YouTube, Indie Escape Network YouTube channel, all of our shows in a very nice, huge format can be found all right there. You can pick whatever movie you want to look at, whatever episode you want to check out. Tonight is the Blue Harvest episode. If you're in the know, you're in the know. Can't help you if you're not. But I heard tonight, I learned something fast. Beside the fact that we have a Facebook page as well, that's fantastic for the Indie Escape Network, where creatives unite. It's a lot of people that are bringing things together, doing great shows, doing amazing work on the network, and bringing a lot of creative talent together, like you and I, David Madison, Joe Ridgely, and Scott Chiaffo, Wendy Ziron on her show on Thursdays, and Joe and I have a show coming up Wednesday night as well. So it's a place where we can find a lot of cool stuff, and we just want to keep it going. And in starting, we got to say hi to people that are saying hi to us. Ken McKernan, good evening, friends. Good evening, Ken.
Evening, Ken.
And
nice
Joe,
to have you aboard.
Good evening, gentlemen. We may be able to get advertising around if one of you wore the bikini, and I thought you guys were dedicated. Laugh out loud. I'm going to say it's Rich wearing the bikini for trying to get revenue. I'm
again.
Not the first time it's happened. Joe mentions some of the 501st Legion will be at a PopCon. I think I got it right this time. Saturday, May 6th. That's what we'll be doing. I do want to also promote. We're going to promote a couple more things. Joe and I have a big show on Wednesday night as well with a bunch of folks from a PopCon that we're going to do. So I'll be joining him, talking to some folks, our good friends from Harlow's Haunt and some other people, Big Top Evil, and a couple other cool people joining us on Wednesday. But tonight, Rich, we get to embrace the best nerds, the best nerd things. Because I was thinking about it. I was 3 years old when I saw Star Wars in '77. I remember it vividly. My dad ran the Viewmont Theater, played Viewmont. I wore C-3PO stuff, and I've recently come into possession of stuff in my dad's movie theater staff of pictures and everything. So real factoid stuff that I thought was like maybe bullshit that my parents had made up, but apparently it's all true. I was a ham even then.
Are you saying there's a picture of 3-year-old J.W. Colwell in a C-3PO outfit?
No, there is a picture of. There are pictures that were sent to my father, and during the pictures being sent to my father, it was all about. And also, I remember, like the person who wrote me said a nice, very story about. I also remember the day you showed up in the C-3PO outfit, and I had always thought it was bullshit. Something my dad made up to make me like feel like you were a nerd even then. And it turns out it wasn't. 501st is a huge Star Wars cosplay group. Yeah, we had them when I ran Endless Mountains Theater in Scranton. We had them for opening some of the openings of Phantom Menace and definitely Phantom Menace. We had them for. There's nothing scarier than sitting next to somebody in a theater that's dressed like Boba Fett or a stormtrooper, for fuck's sake.
They're nice guys. They do charity.
A lot of stuff for kids.
They've done
a lot of stuff for kids.
I have a very vivid memory of about 2005 or 6 at New York Comic Con in the Javits Center of Kevin Smith being escorted along one of the main walkways outside of the main rooms of the cons, flanked by I think it was like 6 stormtroopers. And now we know why he picks that trilogy. Now we know why it's Return of the Jedi, not Return of the King. But tonight is a celebration
We've stopped our Oscar Decade Cavalcade specifically so we could do a celebration for two reasons. One, we both love Return of the Jedi. It's 4th anniversary. But the other big reason is, Rich, it's coming back this week.
Yes.
So you will have a chance from April 28th to May 4th to see Return of the Jedi on the big screen. It is the special edition. I know people get all up in arms about the special edition stuff, but it's still a chance to see, Return of the Jedi on a big screen with like-minded people who will be searching it out this week, and being able to see it with like better sound, better 4K, capabilities in most theaters today. It's a great opportunity to revisit kind of like what's become the redheaded stepchild of the original Star Wars trilogy. And it's totally wrong, but it is what's happened, right? A little bit.
We'll get into that.
Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to this. I mean, even though I just, did a refresh watch of this today for tonight, I'm still looking forward to getting together with some friends from high school. And we're going to go Saturday night. It's looking like we're still trying to iron out the details. But, this is a movie, I saw in 8th grade when it came out. And then
I was 9.
There was, that first re-release a couple of years later, myself and a couple of friends from high school went and had a great time. And, I'm just called them all up and said, "Hey, you free on Saturday? Do you want to do this?" And they're like, "Yeah."
It's a great way to reconnect. And it's also a great way to show somebody big screen Star Wars if they haven't seen it for the first time. Because a lot of people, not us, right? But a lot of people haven't experienced Star Wars movies, the originals, on the big screen. I mean, they had, you know what I mean? Yeah. And you and I, we both have younger family members and people in our lives that have kids. And so it's a good time to re-release Jedi. It's kind of funny. I'm like, they're re-releasing Jedi, but they didn't re-release Empire. And I was like, or Star Wars. They had a golden opportunity to re-release Star Wars 40th anniversary as well. But one of the things that comes with being a Star Wars fan is being nerdy about certain things. So the episode tonight is called the Blue Harvest episode. Rich, tell the folks why it's called the Blue Harvest episode.
Okay. By the time Empire Strikes Back had come out, Star Wars was not just the dominant force of the pop culture zeitgeist. It felt like it was the pop culture zeitgeist.
Everyone.
And everybody wanted to know what was going to happen next. Everybody wanted spoilers before we knew spoilers was a word. So as they were prepping to do the third movie, they knew that they were going to be shooting up in Northern California in the Redwood Forest. And, well, if you roll into town and go, "Hi, we're here to shoot Star Wars 3, people obviously are going to freak out and they're never going to be able to get anything done. So what the production company did is they rolled into town and said, "Hi, we're shooting, we're from Lucasfilm, but we're shooting this horror movie called
this horror
Blue
sci-fi
Harvest.
movie." Yeah.
Yeah. The ultimate horror experience or something like that. And so, we're just here. We're going to, buy some tools and some lumber here at the lumber yard. And then we're going to go off and make our movie. Don't bother us, please. And most people just kind of shrugged and went, "Okay." And then, I mean, some people started to figure it out once like Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford rolled into town. But for the longest time, all of production on Revenge of the Jedi, which becomes Return of the Jedi ultimately, was under the code name of Blue Harvest.
And the other, also for practical reasons, I don't know if you've made 2 hit movies and you're making a 3rd hit movie, people might get gougy with the prices of said lumber or said tools or said borrowing equipment or said anything. So it was also, from what I'm reading during the production, it was set up as a way to not only avoid price gouging, but to also keep everything as a great secret as they could, which is super interesting. And so what I love about our show is that I usually find stories every week, and this one story during the production is the one that I think it not only is the story of the original trilogy, it may be of the entire Star Wars franchise, right? So Star Wars hits, it's a major hit. Empire hits, it's a major hit. It has two things. It has two things in common. It has George Lucas, the cast, and it has producer Gary Kurtz. And the interesting story about Empire to Jedi is that Gary Kurtz and Gary Kurtz, hasn't often been celebrated by everyone, but he started in the last, say, 13 years to really get kind of the recognition he deserves of being the co-parent with George Lucas that got the first two movies where they needed to be. And so there's a really interesting article from 2010, the Los Angeles Times introduced Gary Kurtz, and basically Kurtz loved the franchise. He loved George Lucas. He loved the cast. He loved everything. But as time progressed through Industrial Light and Magic and George Lucas, the revenue that was generated by the toys, merchandising, lunchboxes, T-shirts, posters, figures behind me, was too much, was more than the generation of revenue from the films. And one of the things that Gary Kurtz was always talking about with Lucas is, don't make a movie for toys, make a solid movie with characters and characterization and story, and the toy profits will come from it.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have a falling out, and you hear the rumblings about the production of how much it changed once Kurtz was gone, right? Where, basically the third treatment was supposed to have lots of changes, right? Han Solo was supposed to die mid-movie in an Imperial base attack. The movie was originally written with the rebellion in tatters, but Leia assuming the throne, becoming queen, and Luke going off on his own like a spaghetti western is the way Kurtz described it. And Kurtz was also very, Kurtz was curt. In looking at when he saw Return of the Jedi, it was never supposed to end with an Ewok luau, which I think is interesting. But I also think as I was rewatching it today, I think one of the things that doesn't come across, the Ewoks, yeah, they can be perceived as annoying, but they're adorable. And the idea, the more I thought about it, I was saying yub yub all day. I was saying Gunda, as I was eating my dinner. Yeah, it was just terrible. You can see the visions, right? But I was thinking about Kurtz, and Kurtz, the stewardship of the material and the stewardship that Kurtz put into it is, for me, the defining story of this. Once we get past Kurtz and we get past Irvin Kershner directing Empire, we get to Jedi, and Jedi's offered to everybody, Rich. Jedi's offered to Steven Spielberg, but there's a huge row with the Directors Guild that forces him off. It's offered to
David Lynch.
Yeah, most famously David Lynch. Can you just imagine a David Lynch who then declined? It was also offered to David Cronenberg. So the two Davids. I can't even imagine I can imagine a Spielberg Return of the Jedi, but I cannot imagine a David Lynch Return of the Jedi or a David Cronenberg Return of the Jedi.
I think both of them were very smart to turn it down, even though they were at very early parts of their careers where that could have been very helpful to them. Because ultimately, as we know, George Lucas, oversaw so much of the production that the eventual director that they did go with, Richard Marquand, was kind of almost superfluous to the whole process.
Well, and also, he has a great quote during production. He somebody was on, asking him a question, and he's like, because what happened during production, they fell behind. So Blue Harvest fell behind, and Lucas at the time was very, very cognizant of taking over B directing duties. So the camera group A, camera group B, and he did it on Raiders of the Lost Ark. He did it on American Graffiti. He did it like he took control of a lot of stuff. But Richard Marquand equated it to it's basically somebody directing King Lear with Shakespeare in the other room, waiting to go over exactly what I'm not getting.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not a tense set though. One of the interesting things that comes up during production is that none of the principals were slated had contracts beyond the first 2 movies. So they had to nobody. And so that also, one of the things that Kurtz was always kind of like critical about to Lucas. Lucas always used to say, we envisioned a trilogy of films. And Kurtz has always told the truth, which is we were making one movie. We probably weren't going to get a second chance. We had wanted to do Flash Gordon, but we didn't get the rights to Flash Gordon. And King Syndicate was absolutely abysmal to deal with. That's why we called it episode 4, because we were winking that we were doing a serial. And when George says things like, I had always envisioned a trilogy, I cringe a little bit. I cringe. And so I think that's an interesting kind of story. And like Empire was kind of fused from the fuselage of stuff he had part of the treatment for A New Hope. And then Jedi kind of has all different, the script changes a bunch of times, especially after Kurtz leaves. But none of them are contracted. One of the big things that comes up is that Harrison Ford, who goes and becomes Indiana Jones in his downtime, doesn't need the franchise as much as Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill do at that point. And they're not sure. The reason they put him in Carbonite to begin with is because they didn't know they could get him back. And then when some of the stories are just astounding.
Yeah. Well, to circle back just for a moment, to the things George Lucas says at various times about his plans and what he was thinking, they don't always line up. There's been actual books that kind of have dissected his public statements over the years, and bless him for creating all of this, but I sometimes don't think he's quite so honest, or maybe he's self-mythologizing a bit. I don't know. But it's kind of dicey at times. Now, the scripts for the first 3 films, all of them underwent substantial changes. There's 3 other drafts and a treatment of the first Star Wars movie that are all radically different from the 4th draft, which we get, which they used to shoot the film.
That's kind of funny that it's episode 4 and they use the 4th draft. Hilarious.
There's an early draft of Empire that's floating around online too. That's kind of like, holy cow! It had all sorts of stuff in there. And then I've not seen any earlier drafts of Jedi floating around, but at one point there was 2 forest moons and some other stuff going on, and I can't remember what else was in there, but there's a great book out. Came out several years ago now, but I think it's still available, probably on Amazon, called Star Wars: The Annotated Screenplays, by the film historian Lawrence. Crumbs! I'm gonna screw this name up because it's French. Sorry. Yeah, I know.
I didn't take my French lessons today.
I took 3 years of high school French, and I still can't do this.
Bad week to stop sniffing glue, Rich.
Well, okay. Well, let's just say I was the only guy in the 3rd year French class. So, I wasn't paying.
Seems like a lucky guy.
Yeah. Anyways, the writer's name was Laurent Bouzereau. He's done a lot of things in terms of writing about Star Wars history and Lucasfilm history. He's produced a lot of like big documentaries as special features for a lot of home video releases, not just Star Wars, but I want to say he has something on like the Abyss disc and a few other things. The guy knows his stuff. And if you can track down a copy of this book, it came out in 1997. If you can find yourself
right
a
in
copy
time
on my shelf in the other room, it's a really interesting read to see how all the ideas kind of percolated, developed,
and converged,
and things that were dropped out here kind of show up here. A name that was used over here is finally used over here, and things like that. So if you're interested in like the act of creating and the act of, polishing a story and stuff like that, this is definitely something I would recommend to read.
But Jedi is the first movie production wise where Lucas goes from having somebody that's an equal to having people around him that are not inferior, but just not in the same stratosphere as he is power wise. The power dynamic shifts from equal co-parenting on Empire to a divorced parent who has full custody, right? Because Kurtz walks away. A couple comments. Let's see. I am at an age, I was able to see the first 3 in theaters. I am at an age where I saw the first 3 in theaters, and my dad ran the theaters for all 3 of them. And then I'm also at an age where my dad ran the theater for Phantom Menace. So fantastic. This is an interesting comment, and I do want to talk about this. I was 7 in 83. Return of the Jedi was the only one I saw originally in theater. I did see the original trilogy special edition in the theater shortly before the prequels came out. Went to a midnight premiere of episode 1 and was heartbroken. I can understand, right? Because it's essentially about a trade federation. But I want to tell you, one of the interesting things that in all my years with regards to Lucas ruined our childhood and all this other stuff that's come about, one of the interesting things that's happened to me as I've talked to younger people, Joe, and I don't know, and I know you have kids and all this other stuff, the younger folks who went to see Phantom Menace were as changed as we were.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting, like, I used to say this a lot, and it's the same thing with like any of the later Indiana Jones films or Star Wars or whatever. A bad Star Wars movie is still better than a lot of movies that come out. You know what I mean? Like, and same with Indiana Jones. So, but I would say to you, one of the things that has to come across from Phantom Menace, Jedi is the beginning. Like, I don't know if you were watching when you were watching today, Rich, when they decide in production that it's going to be an Ewok village instead of Wookiees, right? You're sitting there going, "Oh, if it could have been Wookiees, it would have been glorious," because it would like people would have been able to easily buy the fact that they're ripping the arms off of stormtroopers and hitting people in the head with rocks. But what I noticed, and it maybe it's the beginning of the functional Jar Jar, right? The idea of Jar Jar, but the Ewoks are cute and funny, and they like. My nephews, when they walked in on me watching Return of the Jedi, they were like, "What are those little things?" "Oh, they're baby little things." You know, like, and like, I understand, you know what I mean? Like, as I get older, I kind of watch Star Wars with the blinders on, where it's like, you got to watch it with a child's eyes, right? And I was 9 when it came out. And then like, I remember, like before it came out, they had the comic books. You remember the really thick comic books that had like, movie adaptation.
Yeah.
And I remember my dad getting the comic book before we got to see it. And he had the comic book, and all he showed me was the last few pages with the Millennium Falcon going into the Death Star. And I was a Han Solo kid. So it freaked me the fuck out. I'm like, what? You know what I mean? Let's see. Joe writes, "We had Ewoks and loved them, but teenagers and adults hated them." I understand now. I felt the same way about Jar Jar. That's what I mean. It's the interesting thing about the production is it still stands the test of time. It's an interesting. We're going to talk about that in a moment.
For me, while we're kind of sidetracked here on Phantom Menace a little, I saw Phantom Menace about a week early. I got advance tickets through the newspaper I was freelancing for at the time, and I took my friend Bob, Bob was a guy who was very spoiler adverse. He didn't want to know anything about a movie going before he went. If he goes to a James Bond movie, he didn't even want to know he was going to wear a tuxedo or not. He just wanted to be surprised by everything. And I totally respect that.
That was so hard that year. It was so hard in '99.
He was such a sound, but he was also a big soundtrack guy too. So he made the mistake of going into like Gallery of Sound or FYD or one of those places, and he saw that because he knew that the soundtrack for Phantom Menace was out early. He had heard the track Duel of the Fates and liked it and wanted to pick up the disc. Picks up the disc, flips it over, and what's like the second to the last track is called Qui-Gon's Funeral. So he was absolutely devastated. He's like, "Fuck,
these are that."
So I took him as my +1 to this screening, just so he could kind of get that pressure of having to keep his spoiler blinders on, and so he wouldn't have to worry about that anymore. And unfortunately, we both kind of came out of there and we're like, okay, we kind of bit our tongues for a week until like we went with friends again to like the midnight screening of the opening, which was basically me keeping a promise to 14-year-old me that was made back when Return of the Jedi came out. You will always see a Star Wars movie opening night.
12 midnight screenings are so 1999. Everything opens at 7. I do miss them, but I also
miss them, but I'm also kind of like, I'm glad we don't have to do them anymore because I'm exhausted.
Thank God. You're getting out at like 2:30. People want to go for a greasy food, and it's like, I'm good. I need to go to bed. Jesus Christ. And I think, one of the things that comes out of production, and it's a real interesting little side story, right? With Return of the Jedi, is everything goes fine filming wise. Everything goes fine. Lucas picks up whatever he can. One of the things that comes out of this movie, right? And it's kind of an interesting production thing. They go and they screen the film in a commercial theater. And they run into all kinds of sound concerns. And so one of the things that comes out of Return of the Jedi is, sound effects not coming through, sound not coming through, music not coming through. One of the things that happens with ILM is that because of this commercial screening of Return of the Jedi, they end up creating THX. So the sound that we're going to listen to the rest of our lives as we progress through moviegoing and theaters, THX sound and all the other stuff, because they had a terrible screening of Return of the Jedi that occurred during the production, it's all there. Now, the budget is kind of huge. $32 million for a 1983 movie is big, but they saved $18 million production budget just using ILM for the special effects. Because Lucas had built everything for the first 3 movies to be in-house, they didn't need any of the other effects houses. And everything became in-house, and then ILM became a star of the show. It became one of the preeminent effects houses in the world. So it's an incredible story with regards to production, that the little things that happen during production, create, ILM and save a ton of money that they can put other places. And then because of a terrible screening, THX is created during production. It's an amazing little factoid. Any other production stories you want to tell? Like Gary Kurt's story is the one for me where I just look at it and I go, when we talk about Lucas being a little bit, he's always been a genius and he's always been super smart, but aloof and kind of like on his own and set in his own ways and set in his own devices. Losing Gary Kurtz at the beginning of this production, going their separate ways, it affected the cast, it affected production. Yeah.
I just remember one thing I did want to bring up. The commander who's in charge of building the second Death Star, Moff Gergerard. Nobody knows the actor's name unless you're a super diehard fan. And I don't think the guy went on to do anything else. Do you know one of the people who auditioned for that role but did not get it?
I do. And he would have killed it. He would have killed it, or he would have taught it a defense against the dark art spell, or he would have been able to take Nakatomi Plaza, or
yeah, it would have been amazing. But Alan Rickman auditioned for that role.
Yeah,
And
so I believe he's the snivelly guy that Vader shows up in the first portion of the movie, where he's just like, I don't have time. I don't have time to see you. I don't have time to see the Emperor. I need more men. And and one of the things, like, I think it's one of my favorite parts of the movie as I was rewatching it today. So this Vader shows up to this guy's ship, and he basically says, "Hey, you're behind schedule. I'm here to motivate you and your troops." And all I could think about was Empire. He killed everybody every 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Who the hell? Like, you see Vader getting off a ship, you're like,
I got somewhere else to be.
I got to go over there. I don't want to get choked out. But
it's funny because in and that it's a great point because and it was picked up in the original run of Marvel Comics back between Empire and Return of the Jedi. There's a 2-issue story arc involving yet another super weapon being built by the Empire called the Tarkin. And among the officers on that project, though, they hatch a cabal to assassinate Vader because they are tired of him.
He just kills everybody. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
That's incredible. That would have been a great movie on its own right. I don't know if they saw Rogue One or anything else. Anytime people try to kill Vader, it doesn't really go well.
No,
it just doesn't go well. But they go through the production, everything goes well. They hide it. It becomes the Blue Harvest, and it finally gets released. It gets released on May 25th, 1983. So we're a little bit early for celebrating the 40th anniversary, but it gets released on May 25th instead of May 27th because it wants to coincide with the release of Star Wars. And it will later become like a quintessential date for any Lucasfilm movie going forward, although it's since stopped. But the box office occurred.
That was part of the reason Solo came out so quickly after Last Jedi, was because they were trying to readjust the release calendars back into that late May corridor.
Yeah, it was
bad. And then Episode 9 was going to follow 16 months later in that same May spot. And then, of course, all of that went to hell in a handbasket anyways. But that's what they were trying for. And I really wish that they had done it just because, I'm a nostalgic person that way. I feel like that's the proper place for it and not in December.
And the last place where we get any kind of thing during the production before, as we hit the box office, there is and you had already mentioned it, but there is a major title change. Oh, it's not as good a picture as I wanted it. Well, this poster says Revenge of the Jedi, Rich. And if you got this poster and somehow was able to keep a copy of it, it's worth anywhere from $25,000 to $45,000 because this poster got sent out and then they changed the title to Return of the Jedi right before it opens because of the controversy about the idea of a Jedi wanting to get revenge. It basically not Jedi appropriate. Although there's a lot of revenge in the movie. There's a lot of murder in the movie. But this revenge poster, it becomes a classic by Drew Struzan. And it's one of the most sought after memorabilia items you could ever get, the Return of the Jedi poster versus the Revenge of the Jedi poster. But it opens to incredible box office. Opening weekend, we're looking at $23 million, which is 7.4% of its total gross. 23, by the way, was the amount that Evil Dead opened to this weekend, which, just to put in perspective, it goes on to gross $309 million domestically in 1983 dollars, $475 million worldwide, which, if you equate it out, inflation and adjusted domestic box office, is $852 million based on about 80 million tickets sold. So in 1983, 80 million people went to see Return of the Jedi. And I found a real fun fact diving in the By the Numbers site, which is one of the great sites. It has ranks and ranking on records and milestones. And one of the coolest milestones and records that you see for Return of the Jedi is in its 97th, 98th, and 99th weekend of release. It has the highest grossing for any movie that was in theaters that long. We're like 677 days, 684 days, and 691 days. So it has the record for being the highest grossing movie at the 97th weekend at the box office, which means Rich had played over 100 weekends at the box office.
Not too shabby.
Well, when you look at it, like when we're looking at these old movies, 99 weekends at the box office. Think about tomorrow, right? March occurs and Scream comes out the first week of March. Tomorrow, Scream will be on Paramount Plus for free. So, it's not going to get 99 weeks at the box office.
No.
We're in a different world and a different time. So, but I thought it was one of the most interesting things because it's the number one ranking thing for Return of the Jedi. It's not number one in a lot of places, but the weird little thing. The release happens. It does amazingly well. It becomes one of the highest grossing film of 1983. It adds money every time it gets re-released. It adds money. So I think that's another interesting side note where we've gotten away from it with Disney. They're not releasing them quite as much. But it adds money every time it gets re-released. So we'll be adding a little bit of money to it, theoretically this weekend when everybody goes, if people go. But the production budget is $32.5 million. So the worldwide box office in 83 was 14 times its weight. Astounding.
That's a good investment and good return on investment.
And we're not even talking about memorabilia. We're not even talking about toys and lightsabers and everything that you now can get to relive your childhood, like I have behind me. Let's see.
Yeah, all the merchandising rights that Lucas wisely held on to in 20th Century Fox was like, yeah, you can have those. Not gonna be worth anything.
Well, it's like who thought anything was going to be worth anything? Like it's the same thing with the contract. Like I was astounded with the contracts that nobody's under contract. Carrie Fisher, Mark Hamill, and Harrison Ford could have walked away. I mean, it would be stupid for Ford to because he's still working with Lucas, right? It would be dumb to be like, George going, I really need you to fix that Indiana Jones thing or fix that Han Solo thing. Although one of the big things about production was that Harrison Ford was adamant about Han Solo dying, which he wouldn't get his wish for another 20 years or so. Yeah. Rich, I just read the private chat. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so I mean, it hits big. It also, when it hits home media, which is kind of tied into box office, it's released on VHS and Laserdisc, and it's released almost 10 to 15 times on each format, all the way up until September 2004, where they release a box set DVD with digital restoration. And the special editions, we were talking about it privately. The box office for Return of the Jedi Special Edition in 97, when they released all of them kind of on top of each other, like within 2-3 weeks of each other, right? Jedi, Empire, and Star Wars did so well, they were shocked that it did that well. Because they did very well with very little fanfare. They kind of took it to, but it was a time when there weren't a lot of movies being released. But and that's the box office story of any Star Wars film is amazing. Is an amazing amount. I would rather drink bleach than watch Return of the Jedi. David, it's not. Well, first off, bleach is going to kill you. So you're saying you'd rather die than watch Return of the Jedi? I don't know. Come on. I know you're a Star Trek guy. I know you're a Star Trek guy. So I'm going to just assume, I'll do the Bleach comment if it was like, if I had to watch Star Trek 5. Maybe. Let's be fair. Why does God need a starship? Anyway, but
well, can we get into that? I guess a little bit of our own reactions on this.
Yeah. Let's do that. I will change the wording. Ready? Critical response now.
Okay.
I rewatched it today. I was thinking about it. I don't know how you feel about it, but I was rewatching it and I'm like, I think it's the redheaded stepchild of the Star Wars trilogy, and I don't know that it's fair. It gives us everything we want, but as we've gotten older and had more opportunities, there have been a lot of movies that have fulfilled us differently. So when I was watching it today, I was like, this is everything I wanted for these characters, right? I think that's a real interesting thing as you're watching it, and it has some of the best Star Wars sequences ever. You know, and it has one or two of the worst Star Wars sequences ever. But because I was thinking about it today, my reaction today was the Ben, Yoda, Luke sequence on Dagobah is designed to make people okay with what happened. But the certain point of view thing, as an adult, is annoying. When we're kids, it's great. But as an adult, a certain point of view is just, you lied your balls off.
Yeah, I think when you're a kid and you hear an authority of morality in a movie saying, yeah, I kind of fudged it a little bit, from a certain point of view, you're kind of like, oh, adults can lie, and it's okay if they can justify that bullshit.
Well, and I also, like, the other thing that kind of dawned on me today was Yoda goes from very vibrant in Empire. Luke's gone, 3 months?
I think technically it's 6 or 7 months is the.
But he goes downhill incredibly fast, and I think it's more like, I trained my last Jedi. I'm done. Get out of here. Get out of Dodge. But that sequence today, it also slows down the movie, right? The movie is careening at that point. We just get done with Jabba's palace, which, by the way, if you are a Star Wars fan, and that, I'll tell you where I had the Pavlovian reactions to stuff, because I think it's warranted. If you do not get a physical cocaine-like bump to that first nod of music, and Luke doing the wave, and R2 just slowly with the little hatch opening up, and everything clicks into place. It was Pavlovian today. I watched it and just went absolutely gaga. And the thing is, I didn't like Luke. I've never liked Luke. I've always liked Han Solo more. But Luke, at that moment, for me at 9, and for me today, Luke is a badass. And also, this is another dark thing that I got today during the watching. Boy, those Skywalker kids can kill a lot of people. They're like, she's choking out Jabba. Luke is killing all these underlings. It's this one thing where I was watching, but that sequence, that Jabba Palace sequence, it's one of the best sequences in all of Star Wars. It's exciting from start to finish. We don't know where everybody is. There's intrigue to it. It has the single greatest. I know everybody's gonna say the bikini, but I think the single greatest Leia costume is the Bouche outfit. Leia Bouche is the best outfit because she came as a figure and you could take the helmet off.
Now, I when I look at Return of the Jedi, and especially as I was watching it today, I look at, like, the original Star Wars is a family film. Kids can watch it, adults can watch it and get something different out of it. Empire kind of leaned a little bit more towards adults. It was a little darker, a little grittier, had some more dark themes. And then the pendulum swings the other way, And I think Return of the Jedi is appeals a little bit more to kids. I don't think it quite has as grown up themes as Empire does. And that's fine. I don't like a lot of the I think Return of the Jedi could take about 50% of its comic relief and jokes out, and we would still be just fine with this movie.
Still be well, and actually that's some of the stuff that comes across. Ford does look disillusioned, right? That is a real, but think about where Ford is in 83. He's just got done doing Raiders. He's getting ready to do Temple of Doom. He just got done working with Ridley Scott on Blade Runner.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So he comes into this and he's just like, okay, I'm playing a pirate. I'm literally playing a pirate. And, you know, he's given goofy choices, like a lot of the stuff doesn't land. But what I would say is there is nothing where you're watching it where you're not your 9-year-old self, or your case, you said you're a little bit older, right? So your 9-year-old self or your 13-year-old self or your 12 or 11 or 10 isn't giddy. Like Jabba's palace is amazing. Like the first time you see a pig guard and they do like a full close-up and he's just kind of like gurgling all over himself. Yeah, I'm there. Also, I also love the beats. Like one of the things that doesn't happen in Empire, there are R2 and 3PO moments in Empire, but R2 and 3PO, for many people, Star Wars, the whole opening is them. They didn't get a lot to do in Empire, right? They get some to do, like, but not, you know,
they're
R2 shows up. Yeah, but this one, they're back on Tatooine, they're traveling the road. R2's still a jerk. 3PO's worried about everything. R2's like talking smack as he's being put into servitude. You know what I mean? Like, and the reactions, like Chewie and Han in the cell, and it's very Pavlovian Star Wars. Let's see what other people are saying. Okay, so Ken writes special editions, remastered editions at IMAX. That was a whole new experience. Yeah, and it's not necessarily like the interesting thing about IMAX. They usually just blow things up, and then sometimes films are filmed for it. We're going to see a couple of those this summer.
I have problems with the special editions, though. I've talked about it a lot in terms of the first film. Well, all three films are constantly expanding and developing new technology in terms of visual effects, and these films kind of exist as the document of those
times, yeah,
in those times. And Star Wars, the original film, won a Visual Effects Academy Award. Empire and Return of the Jedi won special Oscars. They were taken out of the normal race because we know how this would end, and they were given special Oscars. And I think when you replace some of that work with other stuff, you're suddenly and not making the original available from a film historian standpoint, you're just basically creating a lost film.
Well, and also
from people who want to understand how this whole creative process and this whole technological process progressed. And also, you're kind of shitting on the people who did the work. And
the other thing is, it would be something if Lucas was putting stuff in that was important, right? But he always tends. It always tends to be annoying.
Stuff that damages the storytelling, especially in Star Wars, and to a lesser extent in Empire. For example, like all those windows in Cloud City, I hate those windows that they added because before you had these kind of walls that were closing in on them as they're trying to run and save Han. It creates
because there's nowhere to go. You have no idea where you're going in the city.
Yeah,
it's just one big
add all these
palace.
Windows so we can see some pink fluffy clouds outside. Kind of I think this detracts from the visual feeling that it is trying to come across here.
I think that's an interesting take. I also think one of the things that comes up with Lucas when he says this was my original vision and yada yada, there is a pointed argument where he is trying to take back what he has given out to people, right? And it's one of the things that I was thinking about a lot when I was watching today. Let's get some more comments. David writes, I don't agree with this. Star Wars is the perfect reflection of a dim sci-fi fandom. I disagree wholeheartedly. Star Wars is a reflection of a fandom that was obsessed, a fandom that's big into serials and likes the serialization of a contemporary sci-fi. Not every sci-fi film needs to be Blade Runner.
Yeah, Star Wars came at a time when the American psyche was kind of at a low. We got our ass kicked in Vietnam. We were experiencing, problems with the gas crisis and everything. And honestly, even 20th Century Fox thought their big sci-fi movie for the year was going to be Damnation Alley, which is like this dismal, depressing, post-apocalyptic thing. And this
not as David says, space opera schmutz.
It's space opera. It's a little schmutzy. It's a little schmaltzy, but that's okay. That's okay. I don't say that. I don't think that's a criticism. I would say that, the fact that Star Wars came and, kind of energized people and gave people a new hope, if you would, or, at least, something to feel good about after half a giant of just malaise in this country.
Dismal sci-fi. Sci-fi was boring and Star Wars was exciting. The giant sand vagina monster was cool. We also have Kathy Fraser coming in. Thank you, Kathy, for joining us. Love Jabba and the Ewoks. Yes, I said it. Fight me. Laugh out loud. You're not going to get any fight on Jabba. I'll tell you what. Jabba is one effect that never gets old. He's got his own language. He dominates the proceedings. He's fun to watch. He's one of the single greatest special effect puppets of all time. Like, he is amazing.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
He's astounding. When I was like, you notice some of the weird stuff when you're older, right? Because there's sexual tension that you didn't notice when you're 9. But Salacious Crumb sitting in the little curved area, and he's watching the tail kind of wiggle its way towards Princess Leia, and I'm like, that is not what I thought it was. That is not what I thought it was when I was 9. Let's see. I love when Teddy Ruxpin kills the stormtroopers. Sure. I would agree with you. I would say, yeah, Wookiees would have been a better choice. But I also understand the concept, that there are, one of the things I noticed today, right? Because I was looking for some of the arguments that you get when you watch Return of the Jedi and why it's the redheaded stepchild, right? Because I told you that when we were talking in the green room, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the funny things about it is, I was thinking about it, right? So, structurally, critically today, it is a legion of the Emperor's best troops, but it's only one legion. There are a lot of goddamn Ewoks, Rich. There are a ton of, they all look different. And also, it sounds weird, but the tactical strike team that Han Solo might have been able to generate from the Rebels might have been a pretty cool, like, if you're sending a strike team with 20 people in it, it's got to be a bunch of badass rebels, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about that. They take that position right next to the satellite dish immediately. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I was going through that today. I don't think it's necessary to Teddy Ruxpin. Let's see. Requires no thought or reflection. I don't know. I think the sins of a father and the idea that a father finally realizes mistakes and throws a guy down a well is pretty cool. That stuff, like that Vader fight is still one of the better lightsaber battles we're ever going to get in Star Wars, right?
Mm-hmm.
It has a nice pace to it. It's not as good as Empire. It has an emotional
stake too.
It does. The moment Vader gets the etchings on another person he can convert to the dark side, Luke becomes a badass. And I think also the idea that one of the things that the prequels provide to us that gives it a little bit more depth, like Palpatine, as I was watching it today, I was having visions of like the purple lightning. the first time we see purple lightning is when he kills Mace, or theoretically kills Mace, because again, that's a rumor. But when he kills Mace, it's the first time we see purple lightning, right? And so I was watching it today, and like, you know, watching the Vader, there's a couple of Vader head movements where you're watching it, and I was like, because he's seen this before. He's seen him use the purple lightning on somebody he really admires or loves, right? You know, and I don't know. I had a Pavlova reaction to it. I was thinking to myself, how is
that's
this?
a nice way that, you know, the prequels kind of goes back and kind of colors in those little connections and shades that just a little bit. And you don't necessarily need to make that connection having seen all of the films, but if you do, you know, it's nice that it's there to be discovered.
Okay, so we're loved, but Star Wars has aged poorly. I don't know, man. It's still the preeminent pop culture phenomena. It's still, even if you have all the Harry Potter fans in the world and you have all of the MCU fans, or if you have all, like, Star Wars is still on the tips of everybody's tongues.
Well,
and while
here's what I'm thinking. If I may interrupt, I'm sorry.
No, again.
Back in 1977, when Star Wars came out, it angered, disappointed, pissed off, whatever, a certain section of science fiction fandom that liked Star Trek. And because Star Trek followed the laws of physics up to a point, it kind of, had, it was the show was a morality play disguised as science fiction every week. And so it was kind of, on that level, it was a little bit more towards literary science fiction. And, so certain fans loved that. And they didn't like kind of like how Star Wars was a throwback to like the golden age of science fiction, where it was just like all sorts
Buck
of
Rogers and Flash Gordon.
And Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon, things like that, and pulp stories in general. And frankly, I love them both.
Yeah,
they can both coexist. I mean, last week, I got up Wednesday morning at 6 o'clock in the morning to watch the last episode.
Perfect example. Yes.
And the next morning, I was up at 6 o'clock to watch.
I called it
series finale of Picard.
I explained it
both for various different reasons.
I explained it at a party this weekend, as last week Wednesday and Thursday was like a cocaine nose bump of nostalgia. It was like Wednesday and Thursday were both so great, and they were both so different, but both equally important to the pop culture realm. And I understand, like, I grew up loving Star Wars. My dad loved Star Trek. I eventually fell in love with Star Trek too. And I understand what David's saying about it aging poorly. I understand. I feel you're right, though. I think there's a place for both. There's a place for really serious science fiction, like Children of Men, and there's a place for Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049. And there's a place for Star Wars where you just want to have fun, and you want to, and Jedi, one of the things that comes up about Jedi, here's an interesting thing, and we do the Rotten Tomatoes thing every week. Jedi is 83% from critics, but Rich, it's with over, and that's with 99 reviews. It's 250,000 reviews and counting of fans. It's at 94%. So when we say it's the redheaded stepchild of Star Wars, I got to tell you, people still love it. Mm-hmm. They just love it a little less than Empire and Star Wars.
Okay. Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing. If I want to watch a story about a guy who's poisoned and only has 24 hours left to live, if I want to watch a fun version, a crazy, wacky version of that, I'll watch Crank. If I want to watch a nitty-gritty, more realistic take on that, I'll watch 1949's DOA with Edmund O'Brien. I mean, it's the same story, but two very different.
I'm going to say this to you as a movie fan: you complete me. But I think Ken writes this: Star Wars ruined Star Trek for me. Star Trek movies sucked in comparison. I don't agree. I actually think one of the things that David would probably agree with me is one of the things that Star Trek fans have gotten most riled up about is that Star Wars influenced Star Trek to become more Star Warsian, right? Is if that's not really a word, but I'm going to use it. So when you do Wrath of Khan has Empire Strikes Back elements to it, and it becomes one of the great movies of 1982. So I mean, I understand, and the thing is, we're quibbling about this movie. It has a great opening sequence, one of the best in the entire franchise. It also has, like, again, you rarely see non-important Empire people, and that guy at the beginning is like the ultimate, like, I don't have time or men. The rebels are killing us. And Vader's like, I don't know. I'm going to have to, we're going to have to cut off limbs or something. I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. Also, I killed like 12 people in Empire.
I think ultimately, though, in the whole Star Wars, Star Trek debate, I think we're kind of quibbling about taste. There's a lot of things in Star Trek I like. But everything kind of like from DS9 onwards until recently, I didn't like for various reasons. But it still has its fans. And that's fine, too.
And I think one of the things about Star Wars, Return of the Jedi, as we're talking about it actually dawned on me today. Like, I don't watch it as much as the other one. And what happens when you don't watch, I don't watch it as much as I've watched Empire or Star Wars, right? And what I would say is one of the things that happens in those instances is that the negative things you hear from people chirping on either side, when you don't watch them for as much as you should watch them or have watched them, the negative influences come up and they're like, the Ewoks become irrepressibly huge and stupid, or the certain point of view dialogue becomes weird. And I think that's one of the magic things of the response then and now, right? Is you can watch Return of the Jedi and just enjoy it, or you can watch it and realize of all the differences that occurred from Star Wars and Empire to Jedi, it is a great functional box of what the franchise became after Empire, right? It's essentially, it's like a microcosm movie. It has a little bit wonky dialogue. It has very cute characters that you don't necessarily may fit the universe, but it also has the Jabba sequence, which has the Rancor, and it has Luke, and it has our characters in real peril, real danger. And so I just think at the end of the day, when we look at Jedi, it's not as bad as we think it is. It's just bad compared to Empire and Star Wars, which is ridiculous.
Yeah. Ken has one other thing here, and
for me, visually was mediocre compared to Star Wars. I would agree with that because there was
and I think that's only because there are two different aesthetics. Star Wars has smaller little ships and they fly around really fast, and it's like dogfights in space, and that's very visually exciting. Star Trek was always about the bigger ships, and it's like trying to watch the Titanic steer its way from avoiding an iceberg. These things move slowly.
And also the interesting side note here, when you say visually stunning compared to, Star Trek didn't have its own production house. It has to be discussed that the house that was built by Lucas with ILM, where you can do all your own work and you can make everything look better, and you can spend an extra $20 million because you're saving 18 over here. Star Trek is always going to be, for whatever reason, Star Trek is always going to be like kind of on the loose.
But I would still say something like Star Trek 2, I think, it's not the whole sequence in the Nebula with the Reliant and the Enterprise is more about submarine warfare than it is about dogfighting. So like I said, it's a different aesthetic. And then
I think it's all good. I think there's very little there's very little when you're watching a Star Wars movie or Star Trek movie. I know everybody fights about it, but the legacy and the franchise viability, one of the things you come out of Jedi for me, right? Like when you're looking at the legacy of these films, they are such a nostalgia bomb because for many of us, it was the first movie we saw in theaters or the movie we went to with our parents. For my dad, what Star Wars represented and from franchise viability stakes. Star Wars was something that was very odd to him. And so because he grew up watching, 50s movies. So, when I fell in love with something, one of the things that he loved about Star Wars was that he fell in love with me falling in love with something, which is, is a wonderful legacy to have. And that happens again and again with Star Wars as a franchise, right? You find in 99, it hits again. You find when The Force Awakens comes out, it hits again. This idea that you fall in love, a different generation falls in love with it over and over again. And I think for this movie, it is the first of a franchise where it's going to be where Lucas has the reins off, where he doesn't have the co-parent. And so, it also is the place where THX is created. It's also the place where ILM becomes the most impressive effects house in the world, right? And it also is a place where, Carrie Fisher eventually finds her wit, right? She finds her writing skill and she finds her acerbic view because she gets stuck doing this movie. And then, I was in a bikini for 15 days and we don't get her writing without this movie, because she doesn't get addicted to painkillers and she doesn't get addicted to drugs and alcohol without this movie. So that's another small legacy that comes out of it. Star Wars is always going to be a viable franchise, especially when you have people like Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni running it. And even to a major extent, Kathleen Kennedy, who's been a very good guard on the walls for Star Wars. And for all the crap she takes from crazy people on both sides of any argument, she's been a very good vanguard for Star Wars, pushing through projects that are important. Rogue One is an important franchise part of Star Wars. Solo, not so much, but Rogue One is. So this franchise it's always reinventing itself. And now we have The Mandalorian. Now we have Ahsoka coming. We have The Acolyte coming. So the franchise is always around. Now Jedi is also impressive because it's the least liked of the most famous trilogy in the history of film. It's weird. And sometimes you just need weird.
I hesitate to call it the Godfather 3 of the original.
It's not as bad as Godfather 3.
Yeah, it's not as bad as Godfather 3. But you can chart Star Wars Godfather, Empire Godfather 2, and then Godfather 3 down here, and Return of the Jedi here. But still, they occupy the same numerical positions within the thing. Yeah, for me though, it was like, Star Wars came out when I was 8. We were just getting cable, mostly so my older brothers talked my parents into getting us cable so they could watch Phillies games and Yankees games.
A young Rich Drees was not amused.
No. I was all about, oh, wait, Channel 17 out of Philly has a Dracula movie on Saturday.
Channel afternoon. 9 at WOR out of New York. Channel 11 has
the 8 movies all this week. Yes, please. But, so I also had 2 different markets I could draw on for Star Trek reruns. And, Star Wars ignited my brain. And Star Trek was, oh, hey, more spaceships and, phasers instead of lasers.
Different stories.
And everything. And as I got into both of those worlds, it helped me develop, critical analysis skills of going, okay, this is what Star Wars is doing over here. This is what Star Trek's doing over here. And I could appreciate them both. And, it's all good. And if you like one over the other, that's fine. Again, some people like Brussels sprouts, some people don't. So,
the dirt vegetable, Rich Drees. It's a dirt vegetable. It tastes like dirt.
Some 40 years later, we're still having the discussion about which is better. Yeah. And we're, and all of fandom and, here tonight, we're trying to be really respectful about that to each other. And I think that's the sign that both of these things are great cultural institutions.
Cornerstones. So. And the other, one of the things that when we're lucky to have it, and one of the things that I would also say is something I noticed today: the Ewoks are the precursor, franchise-wise. They're the realization by Lucas that kids come to these movies, and even to a certain extent, from a certain point of view, are like when you're younger, it does make sense. It's like, well, Ben did it. It's okay. I'm okay with it. Right. But I think it's a real interesting thing that Lucas started to change the franchise over from the dark themes that were in Empire to things that are for kids. And it's okay that he did it. And it's partly why I give, when everybody freaks out about Jar Jar and, we saw Ahmed Best show up 3 weeks ago on The Mandalorian. And I was so happy for him. But the idea that you're blaming these characters or blaming the Ewoks for ruining your childhood or all this other crap, no. And one of the things is it's just going to be one of those things where, if you really want to talk about a legacy, the idea that, one of the things you notice with the Star Wars special editions is that the stuff that Lucas puts into the movies, like I was thinking about it today, Rich, we're rewatching, right? It's not important. It's trivial stuff. Like it's tedious, trivial stuff. It's not Luke's lightsaber changes colors, or it's not. It's some guy singing in Jabba's palace during a chick getting eaten by a rancor, or or the rancor having a beak instead of just being a weird hole in the ground with spikes, which I found imminently more dangerous. When I was 9, you know what I mean? But you needed the beak. Like, that's another legacy of the Star Wars films as a whole, is the tinkerer philosophy of going back and tinkering. But he's one of the prime culprits of these director cuts and whatever. For every great director's cut you get, like The Abyss, you have a series of director's cuts where they're just tinkering, blind tinkering, and that's kind of a little bit of where Jedi kind of gets in that, legacy phase. Because when watching the special edition stuff today, I was just like, this is meaningless drivel. That, like, changing. I was thinking about this. Tell me you didn't think about this a little bit today. So at the end of Return of the Jedi that we saw when we were younger, it ends. They're celebrating with the Ewoks. Everybody's happy on that moon. Today I'm watching, and they, of course, had the scenes in Coruscant, and they had the scenes in Cloud City and Tatooine and Amidala's planet with the Gungans, because there's Gungans on a palace, like holding a sign, waving a flag. And I'm thinking to myself, how did the news get out that quick? Like, like it's very quick. Like celebrating at the Ewok village is one thing, but celebrating all those other planets, like, how'd the news get out? Like, hey, the Death Star blew up. Second Death Star blew up? Really? Holy shit. And I was thinking,
reasonably sure the rebellion probably had a few propagandists / PR people ready to go on anything that they ever did.
I was thinking of Firefly. I was thinking, that's another franchise viability and legacy. I was thinking of Firefly. You can't stop the signal, right? That signal goes out immediately. Emperor's dead. Holy shit. Thank God. But I do want to say I can't wait to see it in theaters again. I can't wait to see it with the crowd. I got to enjoy Evil Dead Rise this week with a crowd, and I can't Rich, isn't it the greatest thing in the world, like watching a movie with a crowded audience and just hearing like waves of emotion go through them? And then we get to do that with Return of the Jedi all over again.
Oh yeah.
This week. So comments. Ken writes, for me, Star Trek was mediocre visually. We saw that. And then he writes, I'm still more a Star Trek fan. Fair. That's interesting. Yeah. And one of the things I would say is, one of the great things about this franchise and great things about this movie in particular is I did have Pavlovian moments today. So I can't lie. Like, that's one of my favorite things in the world, is that I was able to have moments where my mind, like, again, that first da-dum, and just the, the wave and the fucking, like, lightsaber clicking into place, and it just gave me the feels. And very, like, a lot of movies do that for me, but not the way a Star Wars movie or an Indiana Jones movie or movie I really love, like Blade Runner or whatever. So I was happy about that. So as we begin to end tonight's episode, couple things. We got to do some branding stuff for the folks. At the Indie Escape Network, we have a very big show coming up Wednesday, April 26th at 10 p.m. hosted by Joe Ridgely, and I will be joining him as we discuss folks going to a PopCon. 10 p.m. Wednesday, April 26th, coming up this week. Very cool. Super excited about that, going down with Joe, and then also getting to talk to people a couple nights before. And then also this week, special guest for the Sticky Microphone, Thursday, April 27th. Actor, director, and writer Marty Lindsay. He's been on Better Call Saul, Big Sky, Preacher, Suburban, and Menever. So he'll be joining Wendy. And, you know, Wendy's here is doing a great show on our network. We want to get a little bit of cred for her. People, where can people find your stuff, Rich? Film Buff Online had some really good articles this week.
Thank you.
Paying attention to stuff, and I'm constantly throwing them in the loud and nerdy group. So where can people find you? Where can people find you?
Well, you can find all of my writing at filmbuffonline.com, as well as a link to the Big Picture podcast, which is the other podcast that I occasionally do with my good friend, my best friend, Natasha Bogutsky. Also, coming up at some point this week, I recorded it earlier this evening, so that's why I'm a teeny bit hoarse. I will be on the latest installment of The Film Scribes, which is the official podcast of the Philadelphia Film Critics Circle. You can find Film Buff Online on Twitter at Film Buff Online. You can find me on Twitter at Film Buff Rich. And you can also find Film Buff Online on Facebook, where in addition to, you know, posting links to all our stories and reviews as they go up, we try to get a post or two or three or sometimes even four about things that happened on that particular day in movie history. And hopefully those are always interesting and fun.
Yeah, some interesting ones today. So people can find me, first off, I have a second show, Tuesday nights, Loud and Nerdy. You can find me in the Loud and Nerdy group. You can find Loud and Nerdy the page. JW the Movie Guy also is a page on Facebook. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram at JW the Movie Guy. And you can find me here every Monday night. We're scheduled. Now, I want to make a big announcement. We are going back to our Oscars Decade Cavalcade next week, and we will have a special guest from Everything I Am Told, provided nothing goes wrong and there's no any kind of weird stuff happening. But next week we will get back to the 2000, the aughts, for our movie, and it will be glorious. It will be, are you not entertained kind of stuff.
I will be entertained.
A Hero Will Rise, Gladiator, Russell Crowe, Ridley Scott. Just a glorious sand and sandals epic from the aughts, a glorious film. And we will be joined by Natasha Bogutsky, who will join us because she really loves this movie, and we want to get her unique view on it. That'll be next Monday.
Quick late breaking nerd news real quick before we go.
Yeah, quick. No, you brought this up, and we'll do some quick nerd news, and then we'll end the show. We're right at about an hour and a half, so go ahead.
Oh gosh, yeah. If you don't want to know anything about Kraven the Hunter, one of the Sony Spider-Man spin-off movies that they have coming up soon, just bail out now.
Okay. Still there? Too late.
Today at CinemaCon, literally ending about 15 minutes ago or so, it looks like, there was the Sony Pictures presentation, and they showed a trailer for Kraven the Hunter, which apparently is going to get released online soon, probably in the next 24, 48 hours. Apparently it opens with Kraven biting the nose off of some guy, and it's kind of violent. They said in the presentation that this is going to be an R-rated film. So this will be the first Sony Spider-Man related film that's going to be rated R. which surprises me because you would have thought something like Morbius would have been, because that's, you know, a very hard.
Or Venom, Total Carnage. Or Carnage. What is okay?
I don't know. I'm not making these decisions.
Jesus Christ.
But we do find out who the villain of this piece is. And do you want to know? I mean, you're going to see the trailer in a day or two. Anyway.
We're going to see the trailer. We're going to know the villain. Who's the villain, Rich?
The Rhino.
No.
Yep.
No, not Giamatti's Rhino.
Not Paul Giamatti's Rhino, no, but the Rhino. So
let me understand. I just want to make sure I understand this. So Sony doesn't make good Spider-Man movies unless they're hinged to the MCU, correct? You'd agree with that? Except for the original Raimi ones. And even to a lesser extent, the Amazing Spider-Mans, which were bad movies with bad villains, not necessarily the actor's fault or the director's. Correct? Agree?
Correct.
We've now had 2 bad Venom movies, a terrible Mobius movie, right? A terrible Morbius movie that people got them to re-release to theaters acting like they would go see it, and then they didn't go see it again. And now you're telling me we're going to have a Kraven the Hunter movie where Kraven is the hero, and in the first 5 minutes of the movie he's going to bite somebody's nose, and it's going to be R-rated. And Rich,
I don't know what's going on.
I get tired. I get so very, very tired of Sony Entertainment, except for like Ghostbuster movies. I get so very tired of Sony. This Sony Spider-Man multiverse is just, except for the animated movie, is bleak without Kevin Feige and MCU folks going, no, don't do that. And even when they say, no, don't do that, they still make mind-boggling choices. Like, this sounds painful, Rich.
I fail to see how any of this connects. And, usually I'm pretty good at trying to figure out where these things go.
I'm so glad you are.
We have El Muerte coming up. They're doing
they have a lot of junk projects. Is what they have a third Venom movie and a lot of junk projects. And whatever Spider-Man's going to get sacrificed to the gods at Sony marketing, like. Is it gonna be Tobey Maguire? It's not gonna be Holland, right? It's not gonna be Tom Holland. Mm-hmm. It's gonna be Andrew Garfield, who's already dealt with horrible villains, awful, terrible, no good, very bad villains, or it's gonna be Tobey Maguire, who dealt with terrible, no good, very bad villains once, and got locked out on the other 2.
Does this world have their own Spider-Man that's nobody we've seen before?
Don't give them any ideas, please. We gotta end now. We gotta end and pray for the Daily Bugle and for the Spider-Man character.
At least we have the animated Spider-Man movie and its sequel coming up, which looks fantastic. At least we have that to watch. And
this is interesting. JW, like yourself, I was never a fan of The Big Bang Theory. Really not. That bad show. But I saw an episode where James Earl Jones made an appearance. At the end, he and Sheldon go up to the house to ring the doorbell and run. Then the door opens. Carrie Fisher is there and yells, "James, it's not funny anymore." Then you hear James Earl Jones laugh off camera. Yeah, they hit certain things, but they mostly made fun of nerdy people, and they were never laughing with us. They were always laughing at us. Joe Ridgely, of course, the Rhino. They need an animal-based baddie. Yeah, we're gonna ruin another Batman. We're gonna ruin another Spider-Man villain. For the Sony. Oh, God. Thank you for joining us tonight for Return of the Jedi, our special episode. Again, next week, we are back to our Oscar Decade Cavalcade with Gladiator with special guest Natasha Bogutski. Thank you for joining us tonight. We appreciate all you do. And thank you for joining us on the Indie